The markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Catch up with us on Business Brief. Asian shares are mostly higher as markets await a vote over U.S. President Donald Trump's landmark tax and spending legislation. A vote on Trump's sweeping tax cut and spending bill had been expected during the Asian trading day, but debate raged on over a long series of amendments by Republicans and Democrats. Trump also wants the bill passed before the July 4 Independence Day holiday. Japan's Nikkei 225 and Hong Kong's Hang Seng are in the red, while South Korea's Kospi, China's Shanghai Composite, and Singapore's Straits Times are in the green. But Australia's ASX 200 is flat with an upward bias. In the currency markets, the US dollar depreciates against the Japanese yen, but is flat against the Hong Kong dollar, Singapore dollar, South Korean won, and Thai baht. The Australian dollar, meanwhile, depreciates against the greenback. In commodities and crypto, gold prices rise by 1%. Meanwhile, oil markets are mixed, with West Texas Intermediate crude falling by 0.5% and Brent crude dropping 0.4%. However, Dubai crude rises by 0.1%. In the cryptocurrency space, Bitcoin is down by 0.9%, while Ethereum down nearly 2%. President Bongbong Marcos leads a special bell-ringing ceremony at the Philippine Stock Exchange. In his speech, Marcos made a pitch for the Capital Markets Efficiency Promotion Act, or CMEPA. Ivy Reyes reports.
President Bongbong Marcos headed a historic first for the Philippine market as the Capital Market Efficiency Promotions Act, or CMEPA, takes effect today. Signed into law in May this year, CMEPA lowers the stock transaction tax, or STT, from 0.6% to 0.1% and the documentary stamp tax on stock shares from 1% to 0.75%. Under this law, the country's capital market proves more accessible due to a revamped tax system on passive income, making it, as the Finance Department said, more investor-friendly.
This will encourage more Filipinos to invest in our capital markets. This law also removed the documentary stamp tax on mutual funds and unit investment trust funds, investment tools widely used by young professionals and middle-class savers. The adjustment on rates lowers barriers and opens the market to more investors.
Philippine Stock Exchange President Ramon Monzon said that this milestone is an invitation for Filipinos to invest their hard-earned money in stocks than to lose to online gambling. Government-owned controlled corporations, or GOCCs, are also now subjected to the same tax rates as other entities. A uniform tax rate of 0.75% is imposed on bonds and debentures. The documentary stamp tax on PCSO bettors has also been removed because, according to the DOF, this signals discouragement for those participating in legal gaming activities, which in turn generate revenue for public services. Meanwhile, the president also led the 78th founding anniversary of the Philippine Air Force in Bilyonaryo Air Base this morning. Outstanding Air Force units and personnel were recognized for their efforts and contribution to national service. Ivy Reyes, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Bangko Sentral expects inflation to pick up slightly in June, potentially hitting 1.9%. The BSP's latest forecast puts inflation between 1.1 and 1.9%, a touch higher than last month's 0.9 to 1.7 range. The upper end also surpasses May's actual print of 1.3%, suggesting price pressures aren't fully gone. The central bank cites rising prices of meat, vegetables, and oil, plus a weaker peso as main drivers. But with inflation still below 2%, the case for a rate cut remains on the table. Gold mining stocks dominate the Philippine Stock Exchange in the first half of 2025. Among the leaders are Bilyonaryo Manny Pangilinan's Philex Mining, Lepanto Consolidated Mining, and Manila Mining of Bilyonaryo Felipe Yap, and Apex Mining of another Bilyonaryo, Enrique Razon. Philex Mining soared 130%, making it the top-performing stock on the local bourse. Lepanto Mining's BNA shares followed closely at 109 and 107.5%. Apex Mining was up nearly 79%. Gold breached the $3,400 per ounce mark. This is driven by a mix of global uncertainties that include U.S. President Trump's tariff threats and the Middle East conflict, among others. But there were decliners as well, among them Dennis Uй's PH Resorts, which posted the steepest decline among all PSE stocks, plunging 71%. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian warns of a resurgence of illegal offshore gaming sites, proof that the country remains vulnerable to abuses linked to POGOs. Gatchalian issued a statement after the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, or PAGCOR, released a public advisory warning the public against unlicensed online gaming platforms. The senator called on the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the NBI, and the National Police to work with PAGCOR in blocking access to these sites. PAGCOR reiterated that it does not grant licenses to offshore gaming operators, even if it caters to users outside the Philippines. Tensions between Manila and Beijing escalate once again, this time over illegal drugs. A Philippine military official has floated the possibility that China is deliberately dumping illegal drugs into Philippine seas, a claim that drew a sharp rebuke from the Chinese embassy. The details from Francis Folve.
China and the Philippines once again exchanging barbs. This comes amid the continuing conflict over disputed territories in the West Philippine Sea and a series of recoveries of methamphetamine or shabu in Philippine waters that reportedly bear Chinese markings and are suspected to have come from China. In a statement, the Chinese embassy in Manila denied what it called malicious and baseless accusations by some Philippine military personnel on issues related to Beijing. The embassy was referring to remarks made by AFP spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad. Last June 24, he said that it is possible that China deliberately spread tons of illegal drugs into Philippine waters to destroy the future of Filipino youth.
Historically, there have been instances of large holes of illicit drugs apprehended in the maritime domain, confiscated in our seas that had markings that appear to be Chinese characters. We don't have to look far. From the side of law enforcement, they look for evidence. On the military, we look for indicators. It appears that it is not far-fetched that this could be another effort of the Chinese Communist Party to undermine the future generation of Filipinos upang sirain ang kinabukasan ng isang bansa, buhusan mo ng maraming illicit na droga, illegal na droga, para ang kabataan ay masisira ang tamang pag-iisip. Hindi malayo na gagawin sa atin o ginagawa sa atin yan.
In response, Beijing said they are one of the countries with strong anti-drug policies, and they also claim to have one of the best counter-narcotics track records in the world. China added that both countries are even partners in fighting drugs and other transnational crimes. Defense Secretary Teodoro was also not spared after he said no country in ASEAN is subjected in all fronts by China but the Philippines. The Chinese embassy countered that such statements do not help the country's problems and would affect the resolution of maritime disputes. They urged the defense leader to stop attacking China and instead take the true path of dialogue and consultation. To this, Secretary Teodoro responded.
Pag nahuli ang China, ang sagot nila lagi ay buga. No? Buga. Yung mabuga at Ngunit, yan na lang ang ginagawa nila palagi. Ngunit itong buga na ito ng China, dahil nahuli sila, hindi galing sa bibig ito. Galing sa ibang parte ng katawan na bumubuga, hindi sa bibig.
Earlier this month, AFP Chief of Staff General Romeo Browner Jr. also called out a China-owned media outlet for spreading what he described as propaganda videos against him during the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore. Such propaganda, he said, aims to discredit the AFP and undermine the country's position in the West Philippine Sea. Francis Polbe, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Budget Department approves the release of more than 3 billion pesos to support the government's push for rural electrification. This is in line with the Marcos administration's goal of achieving total electrification by 2028. The Strategic Rural Electrification and Operational Reliability Program of the National Electrification Administration will energize nearly 2,000 sitios and 5 barangays under the 2025 subsidy. Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, or RCBC, appoints Reginaldo Cariaso as its new president and chief executive officer. He replaces Eugene Acevedo, who stepped down after 6 years at the helm. He will stay on as RCBC director. Cariaso's appointment comes 6 months after he was named deputy CEO from his previous role as EVP and group head of operations. Cariaso joined Yuchenko's bank in 2020 after holding senior leadership roles at the Bank of the Philippine Islands, where he served as senior vice president and head of corporate banking strategy, president of BPI Capital, and chairman of BPI Securities. We're taking a short break. More business stories are up next. You're watching Business Brief. Major tax cuts in the stock market take effect today. The Capital Markets Efficiency Promotion Act, or CMEPA, promises lower trading costs and a more investor-friendly landscape. Sujin Kim joins us with the details. Go ahead, Sujin.
Yes, Mai, the Capital Markets Efficiency Promotion Act took effect today, marking a major shift in Philippine capital market taxation. The law slashes the stock transaction tax on listed shares from 0.6 to 0.1%, dramatically reducing trading costs. Take a 100,000 peso trade, for example. Total costs drop from 895 pesos to 395, translating to 500 to 600 pesos in savings for the trader. Beyond STT, CMEPA also lowers the documentary stamp tax on original issuance of shares from 1% to 0.75%. This reduction is expected to encourage more companies to list, including small and mid-sized firms seeking to raise capital. The law also streamlines passive income taxation by implementing a uniform 20% final withholding tax on interest income, replacing a fragmented system of varied rates for peso, foreign currency, and time deposits. Additionally, CMEPA exempts collective investment schemes, including mutual funds and UITFs, from documentary stamp taxes, aligning the Philippines with global standards and promoting more pooled investment vehicles. Market participants see CMEPA as a win for investor access and market depth. However, industry data shows that retail participation remains extremely low. Only a small fraction of the population engages in equity investment. Experts say that tax reforms must be complemented by investor education, public awareness campaigns, and better access to financial products. CMEPA is also only one part of a broader modernization roadmap for the capital markets. Brokers and analysts are now calling for further reforms to create a fully efficient ecosystem. Among the remaining reforms, board lot adjustments to allow smaller share purchases and shorting frameworks to enhance market balance and price discovery. But even with tax cuts and structural reforms in place, the broader outlook remains tied to macroeconomic conditions.
Some way, somehow, the reduction in trading costs, the reduction in the cost of raising capital, it is going to help. But again, the bigger factor will still be the general economic environment. No matter how low trading costs or raising capital costs would be, if general economic sentiment is still somewhat pessimistic because of, let's say, risks and uncertainties, then, investors' appetite for risky assets may still not be that much.
Traders may welcome lower fees, but IPO activity, foreign inflows, and retail uptake will depend on economic stability, interest rate trends, and consumer confidence in the months ahead. And those are latest updates from Pasig City. Back to you, Mai.
Thank you for that report, Sujin Kim. The world's richest man back on the offensive, Elon Musk vows to unseat lawmakers who continue to back U.S. President Donald Trump's spending bill, a measure that ripped apart his bromance with the American leader. After weeks of silence following his public spat with Trump, Musk resumed his criticisms as the U.S. Senate tackled the bill. The tech billionaire once led the Department of Government Efficiency, tasked to eliminate red tape and wasteful spending in government. He had spent nearly $300 million on Trump's re-election campaign. President Trump is quick to retaliate against his former supporter. Trump suggested that his efficiency department should take a look at the subsidies that the Tesla CEO's companies have received in order to save the federal government big money. Musk also quickly responded, daring the government to, quote, cut it all now. A bold statement from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu amid the country's hostilities with Iran. Addressing members of the Israeli army leadership, Netanyahu claimed the Middle East would collapse without Israel.
They have essentially built three paths to destruction. First, the choke ring, a plan to destroy Israel through the Axis. Second, a plan to destroy Israel through missile threats. Third, a plan to destroy Israel through a nuclear threat. This is the raison d'etre of the regime. It's not the only reason they want to destroy us, and we are not their main target. But in order to achieve their main goals, they must eliminate us. You can't conquer the Middle East without destroying Israel. And if Israel ceases to exist, the Middle East collapses immediately.
Israel launched airstrikes on June 13, targeting Iranian nuclear facilities and killing top military commanders as well as civilians. It was the worst blow to the Islamic Republic since the 1980s. Iran retaliated with its own missile attacks. The U.S. eventually launched its own airstrike into Iran before a ceasefire took effect last week. Rice is a political flashpoint, and President Bongbong Marcos is walking a tightrope between consumer relief and farmer survival. He says farmers will still get a fair price for palay, even as the government pushes ahead with its 20 peso per kilo rice program. The president made the statement Monday in Nueva Ecija during a farm machinery turnover ceremony. It comes amid growing concerns that the administration's affordable rice target could lead to depressed farm gate prices.
Nag-aalala yung ibang yung ating mga magsasaka dahil binababa natin ang presyo ng bigas sa 20 piso kada kilo. Paano ngayon ang mga farmer? Kahit anong presyo ang pagbenta natin ng bigas sa palengke, hindi magbabago ang buying price ng palay ng NFA.
Right now, many farmers say they're selling palay at 15 to 18 pesos a kilo, barely enough to cover costs. They support lower prices for consumers, but they warn that if farmers keep losing money, supply and livelihoods will dry up. Fresh off his political comeback, Manila Mayor Isko Moreno leads a cleanup drive in the city. Moreno personally inspected clearing operations along Recto Avenue and several streets in Divisoria. Nearly 2,000 metric tons of garbage were collected in the first 10 hours of cleanup. On Monday, the mayor revealed the previous local administration left a staggering 961 million peso debt to waste contractors. Moreno vows to hold those responsible accountable if corruption is proven. Philippine shares bounce back into 6,400 level as it closes in positive territory. The PSE index ended higher by 0.9% to close at 64.23, finishing the day as the third best performer in Asia. Majority of the Sectoral indices ended in the green, with holding firms rising the most at more than 2%. Advancers outpaced decliners 115 to 79. Total value turnover reached 7.7 billion pesos. Majority of the day's most active stocks ended in the green, with GT Capital rising the most at nearly 6%. Meanwhile, the foreign exchange market, the peso, currently trading at 56.19 against a greenback, appreciating from the previous close of 56.33. And that's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. See you then.